Everyone, thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Startups Unedited. Now, for the folks out there who have been following the show, you probably know that I've been a fan of sales development. I've been a sales development rep when it was still just inside sales and ran teams and have been just a huge fan of the practice. Today, I'm joined by John Moore, who is the head of business development at Cimulate. Cimulate is a LLM platform for top retail brands to really reimagine a bunch of stuff, right, within their commerce experience, starting with search and other agentic experiences. But let's dive into sales development, John. Welcome to the show, and thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to speak with you, George. I'm happy to be here.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your background, and then I want to dig in because for the folks out there, what John is doing in January of 2026 in a world full of AI, full of should I do agents? Should I do this? Sales development is hard, cold calling is hard, all this sort of stuff, right? He is running like the highest performing team that I've seen in a while. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I'm talking probably 10 years or something when the sales development practice was just a different game. So real quick, how did you get into this space, and just a little bit about your career background?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the kind words. Not to go into too much detail. Basically, I first got into sales kind of through happenstance. I was considering doing an MBA, and I happened at a job fair that was happening at UMass Dartmouth, where I was meeting with an advisor to talk through their MBA program, and I met my first sales boss. And there I was doing basically door to door selling business to business. And we did food, paper, and janitorial for adult daycare facilities and childcare. So it was very specific, sort of sub niche of reselling, physical goods. And it was a great job. I had a really great boss there, good mentor, and it was kind of like old school, knocking on doors, dropping off literature, doing calls, following up with people, and then, signing up business. So that was pretty cool. And then I transitioned into tech sales because a friend of mine was working at a company called Select. And I interviewed there for a BDR role. So I had been a closer, but I was in sort of a, regional kind of small business. So it was for me a bit of a lateral move, to go back to just doing business development as an individual contributor, but it afforded me the opportunity to get into tech, which was such an exciting space, and I had known a bunch of people that were in it, and really wanted to move in that direction, especially in Boston, where it's just such a hub for that. And was fortunate enough to meet with the leadership team at Select, which are also a lot of the same people that are leading Cimulate, where I find myself now. So those relationships really paid dividends for me. But I was at Select for about a year and a half. Then that company was acquired by Nike. I ended up working for a Swedish workforce management company, initially doing business development there as well as an individual contributor, and then ended up moving into the partnership team and eventually led all of North American partnerships. Then they asked me to go back and lead North American business development. And when I had left there, I was overseeing the business development team globally. And after doing that for a while, the opportunity presented itself to start up the business development team here at Cimulate, and the company is very exciting to me. Not only because I know the leadership, I've worked with them before and I trust them. They're, a lot smarter than I am. And I know that they do a good job, leading, but also that the product market fit is super sound, and it's just a really exciting space to be in. So, that's what brought me here.
Awesome. Well, you're a pretty smart guy, so I can say from firsthand experience working with you. But I want to dive into what makes a great SDR, BDR. in today's world. And again, just for a little context for the folks out there, John has literally built this team over the last couple months. Again, the backdrop is this crazy market right now that's supposed to be super noisy and very difficult to book meetings in and those sort of things. And I'm not suggesting that it's not. I am suggesting that John's been able to build a team that has the DNA and the skill set to actually be able to rise above and execute against the strategies that he and his team are putting together. So if you had to think about what that ideal SDR, BDR looks like in today's world, what are some of those attributes?
Yeah, I think that the core attributes are much the same as they've been for quite a while. You know, table stakes, you need to have somebody that's very smart, you know, right out of the gate. It is, as you had said, like a more challenging marketplace and continues to evolve and change. So you need to have people that are, you know, intelligent enough to recognize opportunities and be able to, you know, execute against them. Someone that's super smart is really important. Someone that is very competitive and very gritty is also really important. I think that there's oftentimes this viewpoint that, you know, former athletes make really good salespeople, and I think that's true. And I think the reason for it is the competitive nature of it, and just being able to continue to throw yourself into something that's hard, even when it's very, very challenging, and you know, maybe you have a bad day or a bad week, but just being able to continue to grind it out. That's really the difference between someone that's going to be successful and someone that's not, in my personal experience. Someone that's really curious is also super important. You know, this position, inherently you're a bit of a detective, so you know, being genuinely curious about what your prospect, the person that you're speaking with, are doing today, how that's working for them, what their goals are, and how you can help is really, really powerful. But also, just as a BDR yourself, like being curious, like how can I get better? You know, what can I do to improve faster? What are some of the trends that seem to be, you know, working really well? Because that's the other thing. Like when you're doing this kind of job in this space, things change, and things that did work once, you know, don't necessarily work forever. So, you know, you need to be really adaptive there. And that kind of ties into creativity, which is another big one. So somebody that can take in the best practices that you teach them, but then kind of go that extra mile and think about, okay, you know, how can I really stand out, and how can I do this, you know, better, more distinct and different, in a way to stand out. And then the last thing is really someone that's very self-reflective. So when you're reaching out to people, um, you know, you have to be ready to have that conversation. You know, if you're doing a bunch of cold calls, like if you're doing 70, 80, 90 cold calls in a day, it's tough to be able to be really present minded for all of those. And when someone picks up the phone, be able to
Mm.
engage with them. So when you do, you know, you have to be really honest with yourself about what went well and what didn't go well. And there is a healthy balance there, where if you're too self-critical, you can almost paralyze yourself. And it won't be a productive exercise. But if you can, you know, be honest about, hey, this is what I did well, these are the things that I need to improve on. It's a incredibly powerful skill to have. We On my team, you know, we do game tape. So every Friday, every BDR will bring in a call that they had, and we'll, you know, review it together and provide constructive feedback. And then when they're calling, they're generally all calling together at the same time, you know, in the office with everybody, so everybody can hear them. And after someone gets a connect, we all kind of take a moment and review and talk about, you know, what went well and
Mm.
what could have gone better. So just that honest, self-reflective, you know, looking for feedback and staying humble is really paramount as well.
I think every successful book or book on success principles. Every successful coach, Tony Robbins talks about habits, and habits are huge, right? They're really core to, you mentioned, like, great BDRs or SDRs, or, yeah, a lot of time come from like an athletic background, and to be a great athlete, you have to have some great habits, whether that's waking up early and exercising. I tell my son all the time, like, if you're gonna do well in basketball, you got to develop these habits, right? You got to be exercising on a consistent basis. Like, you need to be able to break through and be able to rise above. From that lens, if you think about what the top performers within this function sort of possess in terms of those habits, anything that tends to stand out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you had tied the habits back to athletics, right? And I just remember, like, I read something about like Michael Jordan, like when he was growing up, like he would just do like thousands of shots every day, just to get good at like this one specific skill that he needed, that was obviously critical to his success. And there's so many examples like that in athletics. Like, I myself practice Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and it's like you can pretty quickly, like relatively speaking, like understand like the majority of what the moves are, but to really master them, it's just like continuous like hammering it, to be able to do them effectively. And I think for a BDR, it's much the same, right? So like cold calling is a skill, and if you don't do it regularly, um, you're going to get weak on that, right? And like even somebody that's done a lot of cold calling for years and then steps away, when they come back, they're going to have that rust on, and I'm going to need to kind of get a little bit back in shape, as it were. So really solid BDRs, like, they do a good job of organizing their time, and it's almost like they're spinning a bunch of plates, right? So like they'll have a bunch of different sequences they're working on, and the idea is like, to not just one day you're doing like hundreds of calls, and the next day you're sending hundreds of emails, and then you're adding in tons of people. It's like, we try to basically design a process where they can add in a fairly consistent amount of contacts per day. They can do a fairly consistent amount of calls per day, emails, LinkedIn messages, what have you, so that they can, number one, not just get burnt out, that they're like one day have such a huge load of one specific activity, because these are human beings, not computers, right? Not robots. So that's super important, having that process in place and having a BDR that's good at their own time management. One of the things that I talk a lot about is balancing personalization and scalability. That's something that's been like really core to my success and to the teams that I lead, their success. And what I mean by that is, like, you need to have enough chances to get lucky, right? But if you don't take time and think about the activity that you're doing, and you just have like a ton of volume, you're when you do connect with somebody, that connection is going to be very shallow, and it's not going to yield the results that you need. So the extreme example is like, if you make 200 calls, and then when someone picks up the phone, and you're like a deer in the headlights because you don't even realize who you're calling at that point. You have so
Mm.
many dials you've made, versus you craft one email and you spend 3 hours like really perfecting it. And it's like, hey, that's great. The email's probably awesome, but if they don't respond to it, that's one shot. So it's being able to have enough volume that you again have that opportunity to get lucky, but not so much volume that you kind of don't, you're not really present in what you're doing. Um, I think additionally, really good BDRs, like, they're always iterating on
Mm.
everything. We had talked about a little bit earlier that the things that really work well, they do change with time. And continuously trying new things is important, as a team, because even if you have like a really efficient process, if you're not like challenging it and trying new things, like I believe that you're limiting your ability to There could be a process that's better, right, that you just don't have exposure to, or like a tactic that's better that you don't have exposure to. So even if things are going well, I'm a big fan of like iteration, and also it makes the job more interesting and more fun.
Mm.
Really, really good BDRs leverage resources around them, right? So like on our team, we have, a really great collaborative environment between senior leadership, the BDRs, marketing, the product team. And if someone has a connection, right, being able to like ask for help for an introduction, for example, coordinating with marketing, like, hey, can we do an event in the region? Working with the AE, like, hey, there's these 5 accounts within this geographic region. Like maybe we could do like a physical drop off of some product, right? And just like using those resources around them. And it could even be as simple as just like, hey, do you mind listening to this call and giving me your feedback? But that's really important, right? Because like nobody has all the answers. Like I don't, none of my mentors do. And I think people that are really smart and successful are just aware of their limitations and aren't they aren't embarrassed to ask for feedback and help from somebody that may be just better at that one specific thing than they are. And then the last thing I'd say from a habit standpoint is really solid BDRs. Like they're very goal minded. So really good BDRs, in my opinion, are folks that want to be closers in sales. They're going to have the inherent drive to get really good at the job because number one, they'll recognize that as a closer, if they can supplement their pipeline, like that is a skill that will benefit them for the entirety of their career as a BDR and beyond. But then secondly, like they're going to have the drive to stand out in a positive way so that they're the one that gets that look for, an opportunity to move up within the business when the need arises. So they're inherently driven in that way, but they're able to like set really solid goals and sub goals that are attainable and measurable, kind of follow that SMART goal format. So I'd say that those are some of the habits that I've noticed to be really helpful.
If you think about kind of the leadership piece, right, and what makes like a world-class BDR, SDR leader, now kind of maybe putting on your old, IC hat and thinking about those leaders that you just felt moved the needle, that inspired and educated and motivated you to be your best. What are some of those attributes? So for the CEOs out there, for the CROs, for the VPs of sales or founders looking to identify and hire those type of leaders to run this function, any sort of attributes that really stand out? And before you go down sort of the answer here, one of the things that one of my buddies, Russ Laraway, who was a sales leader at Twitter when we worked there in the Bay Area years ago, used to say it was that there was a difference between a manager and a coach. And what he believed was that the best sales leaders were the best coaches, right? That anyone can sit there and say, okay, well, here's my set of goals. Hey, let's go through, Salesforce and look at the pipeline, what's going on here or there. And the other thing, and he says, that's like table stakes, right? Like that's just like more administrative kind of stuff. But to actually get invested and care about your team and not only just say it, right, but embody it, where your reps are like, you know what, my manager, right, really cares. Like we spend a lot of time talking about my future, and he or she does XYZ to actually go out of their way to do that, right? So for me, I think, and I guess from my perspective, I think those are the attributes that really kind of define a leader in general. But going back to the BDR function, what are those attributes that make these world-class leaders?
Yeah, it's I think that you hit on, what I would say are some of the things that are really important. Like when I first became a BDR, like I can remember my first manager, him and I sort of having one of our early on one-to-ones, and him just being like, what are your goals? Like, where do you want to be? And he did a really great job and was always very good about helping to guide to like, hey, if you want to get to this goal, these are the things that we need to do, right? And you need to build your brand in such a way and instill confidence in the team around you that you're the right person for the job. So a really good leader, in my opinion, is able to number one, they care enough to take the time to understand like what is important for their team, the individual people on their team, what are their individual career goals, and then try to align that with the overall plan that they have for them. For a BDR, generally speaking, in my experience, BDRs are typically in the role for about 2 years, give or take, before they promote in some way to whatever their ambition is. And I think that a really good BDR leader needs to be very clear about like, hey, if that's the objective, that's great. I'm here to help you get there, but be really transparent about like, in order to do that, these are the things that leadership, the people that are going to be responsible for, approving you for that next role are going to expect to see. And you just kind of go into it extremely transparent. I think in that way, number one is first and foremost, really valuable. And then I think beyond that, like you have to mean it, right? Like if you say all this stuff and it's like, hey, I'm here to help you, and then that it's all just kind of lip service, then people see right through that, right? And they understand that, or they quickly will realize that somebody's phony. So, really trying to dig in and see, okay, like what are the things that are needed to have happen? Having conversations on that individual's behalf is super important. And as a leader, like, number one, like in my opinion, I feel like when you hire somebody, like I feel personally um, like I have an obligation to them to do the best that I can to help them achieve their goals. But it is like a sort of symbiotic relationship where it's like, look, like, I'm here to help you. And my expectation is that, you do your job basically. So, but if you do that and like you really are there for somebody and you do have their best interests at heart, I do very much believe that they will, hold up their end of the bargain in most of the situations that I've encountered. There's a really good book called The Go-Giver, which is it's talking about like delivering value, and like it's been a while since I've read it, but one of the main takeaways that I had from the book was basically like if you're trying to deliver value to somebody, and like you do so without any expectation of getting anything back, but ironically, like when you do it that way, like that's when you actually do get something back from them. So anyway, I feel like I'm rambling on about this a little bit, but I would say that, yeah, like, good leaders have their team's best interests at heart. They do hold them accountable, right? Like it is table stakes that like if a BDR joins like it's an entry level job, they want to promote. It is of course expected that they're going to be hitting their numbers, right? Like it would be a tough uh a tough conversation with the higher ups at any company to be like, oh, we should promote this person who's consistently underperforming. But you put processes in place that enable someone to be successful, and I think that's the second piece. Really good leaders, I feel, are good at creating processes that enable their team to be successful, but they're not creating bottlenecks. I've seen, for people that I consider to be good leaders and people that I, think could be better leaders. And I think one of the key difference is really good leaders like don't have that insecurity where they feel like they need to be right in the middle of everything. They feel comfortable empowering their team and putting a process in place that, if they got sick, or got hit by a bus, like their team would be okay, you know, and certainly like having their leadership would obviously be missed, but you know, they're not like integral to every single process where if they can't make it into work because they got the flu, like everything screeches to a halt. So, you know, that leadership, but allowing people the space to, you know, be creative and try different things is super important as well. And by giving people that opportunity to be creative and to try new things, it's also going to allow the team to iterate and find different processes that didn't work, right? Like you as a leader, like you can't anticipate everything. You can't try everything. Allowing your team to try different processes and, you know, experiment a little bit will allow you to more efficiently uncover new best practices that work really well. It's also going to help your team stave off burnout because they're not going to feel like, oh, I have to do this exact thing this exact way every day, right? They can, like, you know, have some fun at work, do something a little bit different. And I think the other thing that I've noticed since going into a leadership position is really good leaders, and leaders that are able to deliver top results are very good recruiters. I think that's something that a lot of times people don't talk too much
Absolutely.
about. But recruiting is really hard, you know, and that's a whole nother topic to go into. I feel like for us at Cimulate, you know, we benefit from having really awesome product and really exciting product market fit. So, you know, we tend to attract really great recruits, and I'm really grateful to have the team that I have here because, you know, everyone does a great job. But, you know, getting the right people in place is super critical. Yeah, I think that's one thing. Additionally, like if I was somebody that was hiring people that are going to be responsible for teams, you know, I would ask them about their experience with recruitment.
Awesome. John Moore, head of business development at Simulate. If folks wanted to follow you on social media or maybe learn more about Simulate, or maybe, you know, when there's new opportunities to add folks to your team, you know, what are the best channels or URLs to reach you?
Yeah, I would just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm John Moore at Simulate. It's the most one of the most common names in the world, I suppose, but the Simulate will help me stand out. Um, yeah, that would probably be the best way to get in touch with me. And I post fairly regularly there. You know, so feel free to give me a follow. Whenever we're recruiting, we always post there. We post on the company LinkedIn as well, and a few different places. So we're pretty easy to find, but that's what I would suggest.
Awesome. Well, have a wonderful day.
Thank you.